Now, a lot of us are on autopilot in life. A lot of us. Okay. And when I say autopilot, here's what I mean. You're going through the motions and there's no real particular intention for what you're creating and what you're doing every day. Now, there might be some intention. You know, for instance, a big meeting and you're intentional about what you look like and how you dress. OK, but overall, there's not a lot of intention in terms of what you're looking to create and build in your life. And then we have these moments of intention, right? Where maybe I'm disappointed with how things are going at the job and I know it's time to find a new job. And so I tell myself I'm going to look for another job. And so as I'm in the job hunt, I'm incredibly intentional about what I'm doing, updating my resume and getting the level of support I need in terms of learning how to interview and show up correctly, like lots of intention. And then we go out and we create the new job. And as we kind of move into the normalcy of being at this new workplace, then we kind of just go back into autopilot. And let me tell you how autopilot works. I can recall getting in the car, and by the way, all of us can probably relate to this. Getting in the car and setting my destination. And by the way, this is a destination. For instance, we can even say the studio this morning, okay? And as you're driving, somewhere along the way, the subconscious mind takes over in the drive, and you go on autopilot. The conscious mind is now engaged in something completely different, thinking about what you're going to have for breakfast, or thinking about where you should get coffee, or thinking about an incident that happened the evening before. The conscious mind is completely consumed. And I want you to think about this. You're basically in charge of navigating a 2-ton piece of metal. And while you're navigating this 2-ton piece of metal, you're not even consciously navigating it. You're in autopilot. The subconscious mind is doing everything for you that you need to do. You see brake lights, you just tap on the brakes. And your mind doesn't really shift, right? You're still thinking about the incident last night. You're still thinking about, what you're going to have for breakfast. Or you're thinking about what you're going to cook for dinner. Or you're thinking about the dinner party that you were invited to and what you're going to wear. And you're driving, and before you know it, you get to your destination, you pull into the parking lot, put the car in park, and then you ask yourself, oh my goodness, how did I get here? That happened to anybody before? I know it's happened to me. And by the way, it can be a bit scary. And the reason I'm asking is because one of the things I'm noticing, just as I move around. So perfect example. Friday night, I went out. I don't get out much. And I went out. And I went to the grocery store to get some milk for my family for the next day. My nephew was at the house, and my son you already know he's going to require some milk. And we drink coconut milk and oat milk. But anyway, Friday night I went out. Okay, most of the time, 11:30 or midnight, I'm in bed on a Friday night. But this time I went out. And I'm driving to the grocery store. And as I'm driving to the grocery store, I'm going to Target near the house, and there's a Krispy Kreme donut, like right on the corner. And again, it's 11:30 at night, and I didn't even know the Krispy Kreme, I haven't been to the Krispy Kreme place, but I didn't know that they stayed open so late. There is a line around the parking lot. Seriously, and this is a huge parking lot. There's a line at the Krispy Kreme donut shop for the drive-thru that is around the entire parking lot. And so I'm pulling into Target and I'm looking at this and I'm like, my goodness. Now, I've had a Krispy Kreme donut in the past, not lately, but in the past. And I got to tell you, they are good. They are good. There's no doubt about it. They melt in your mouth. Okay. So they are good. But it really, I'm like, wow. There's a certain level of intention that you have to actually sit in line at 11:30 at night, almost midnight, to get a donut. Like, and I'm sure there were a few people who they were on their way out and they're like, man, before we go to the club, I need to have a donut. And then there were somebody on Facebook was like, going to the grocery store is going out. And they're laughing at me. Yeah, man. Unless I'm with my wife and we actually intentionally go out. Yeah. I mean, that's just, my life now, right? With, family and a young one. And I actually really enjoy it. But anyway, so yeah, I'm out and I'm like, man, this line is crazy. Then I'm thinking too, like somebody was at home. I want you to hear this. Somebody was at home and they're in their car. They were in their car. They're not even dressed appropriately. All they did was slide on their house shoes and say, I'm going to get me some donuts. But it was something about that donut, something about the gratification that they knew they would feel when they bit into that warm donut that compelled them to get off the couch, put on some slippers, walk to the car, turn the car on, drive 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes to Krispy Kreme, sit in a line that was maybe 10 to 15 minutes long so they can bite into the warmth of that donut. Now, you might be saying, Linnell, where are you going with this, man? Well, what's the point? What's the point? Okay, you went to the grocery store on a Friday night. You saw a lot of people in line at Krispy Kreme. My point is that we are intentional beings. We know how to take action and create what we want to create. However, what I believe is that many of us are misguided. And because we're misguided, we're mismanaging some of our most important assets. And that most important asset is this life. We're mismanaging the opportunity to create in this life. And if we can create the intention in the moment, right, that I want a donut, and then honor that intention, then what I do know is that we can create almost anything. How do I know we can create almost anything? Last night, 9:26 p.m., was the anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. And I mean, you can't really listen to the radio or turn on the TV without seeing the anniversary recognition. The 50-year anniversary of this of the moon landing. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and Mike Collins, and so they're talking about these astronauts and celebrating these astronauts. And the other day, I was watching a little segment on CNN about the moon landing, and it really, one, it inspired me, but two, it got me to thinking that if a small segment of human beings, right? They say it took 400,000 people for them to land on the moon. This conglomeration of human beings and talent and strengths all come together to put man on the moon. But if this small segment of people could land on the moon, right? Like there could be a goal set to land on the moon, which is outrageous, right? At the time, impossible. Then why can't you and I simply accomplish the goals that we set out to do? I want you to think about that. Like what I do know right now, that if you can hear the sound of my voice, your goal is not to land on the moon. That's not something that you set in your mind. But you may have said in your mind that you want to double your income. You may have said in your mind that you want to lose weight. You may have said in your mind that you want to step into a loving and healthy relationship. Whatever it is that you set in your mind as a goal, if a man can step on the moon this morning, I want you to know that you can achieve that goal. But the question is, are you willing to make the sacrifice of intention? And furthermore, do you have the number one secret, the number one recipe, like the number one ingredient for goal setting? And I want to give it to you this morning before we go into how to cope with stress. I want to give you the number one secret, the number one ingredient for any goal setter. I want to give this to you. So what's the secret? The secret to accomplishing your goal is knowing with clarity your why. Why you want to accomplish whatever it is that you want to accomplish. Do you know your what for? That's what we say in coaching. Your what for. Why does the goal matter to you? And I'm not talking about on the surface. If it's a relationship goal, man, if I were in a healthy, loving relationship, I'd be happy. No, consider that it's not just about happiness. Go deeper. Or maybe you say, man, if I could lose 20 pounds, I would feel great. And then I would feel better about myself. Consider that it's deeper than that. And I believe one of the main reasons that many of us give up on our goals is because we don't know why we're setting the goal in the first place. Why does the goal matter? Why does your vision for the goal matter? And this is how you identify it. You have to figure out whatever goal that you have, what's in it for you to make the sacrifice, to actually navigate the inconveniences of keeping your commitments that are created aligned with the goal. Let me say that one more time. You have to get crystal clear about what's in it for you at the very depth of your soul. Like, why does this matter? What's in it for me to navigate the inconvenience of keeping this commitment? Because, by the way, one of the main reasons many of us do not accomplish our goals is because we do not know how to navigate the inconvenience of pursuing said goal. So how do you push past resistance and do the work to accomplish the goal? See, you have to know why you're reading the book, if that's the goal. You have to know why you're writing the goal, like why you're taking the time to actually sit down and write out the goal. You have to be very clear about why you're taking a moment of your precious time to actually sit down and write out the vision. You have to ask yourself why it's going to be important enough for you to read your goal every day. Why? Why? Perfect example. Over 30,000 people have downloaded the book Slay Your Goals. Now, I can see the metrics in terms of, who downloads it. And then I can also see the engagement of the people in terms of who comes back and they ask questions, they send emails, or they grab the audiobook. The percentage drops dramatically. Why? The reason why is because when people download the book, they don't really understand their why yet for reading the book. They know that they want to accomplish goals. They're looking for a secret. They're looking for a silver bullet for goal setting. And I'm going to tell you the silver bullet, because there is a silver bullet. The silver bullet is this. You have to first know with absolute clarity your why. You have to know with absolute clarity what is going to push you past all the resistance you're going to encounter when it comes time to actually step forward and create that goal. You have to know. Real quick, I want to offer a quick case study on goal setting. In my book, Slay Your Goals, one of the things I offer in the book is a statistic. And that statistic talks about the University of Scranton basically did some research, and they found that only 8% of goal setters are successfully accomplishing their goals. And the reason why is because most people aren't writing down those goals. As a matter of fact, actually, it was only 8% of people are successful in achieving their New Year's resolutions. I'm sorry. Only 8% of people are successful in achieving their resolutions. However, they do notate that people who explicitly make resolutions and write them down are 10 times more likely to attain their goals than people who don't make explicit written resolutions. Now, I want to add something to this. 1 out of 10 people successfully achieving their resolutions is demoralizing, if you think about it, right? And we see this happen all around us. Me, I'm a gym rat. I'm in the gym, 3 to 4 times a week for, no less than 90 minutes. All right. I'm a gym rat. And it's interesting to me that when January comes around, how packed the gym is for the first week. And then after that, no one. Right? All the regulars. That's it. Now, one of the reasons I just talked about, the why. The other reason is because people aren't clear about what they want to achieve, and they're not writing it down. But I want to share a bit more in terms of the case study. In 1979, Harvard did an MBA study on goal setting, and they analyzed the graduating class to determine how many had set goals and had a plan for the attainment of that goal in terms of related to getting their MBA at Harvard. And the results of this 1979 Harvard MBA study actually were identical to another study that was done in 1953 at Yale. And what they found in the Harvard Business School MBA study on goal setting is that the graduating class, if asked this question, fell into 3 different places. And the question was, have you set written goals and created a goal or plan for that attainment? So the question was, have you set written goals and created a plan for their attainment? And they asked this question prior to graduation. And they determined that 84% of the entire class had not set a goal at all, right? They were like, look, I'm just going to make it through, right? And we talked about autopilot before. So they were just on autopilot, making it through their MBA. Then they found that 13% of the class had set a written goal, but they didn't have a concrete plan. So what that means is they had actually written something down, but there were no milestones. There were no action plans. There was no real overall structure around what it is they were looking to create. And they found that only 3% of the class had both a written goal and concrete plans for attaining that goal. Here are the results. You likely somewhat would guess this, but 10 years later, the 13% of the class that had set written goals but didn't create plans were making twice as much money as the 84% of the class that set no goal at all. Let me say this again. The 13% that just wrote something down, they didn't even have a plan. They just wrote it down. They were making 10 times as much. Now just sit with that. Just sit with that. The 13% of the class that has set written goals but not created plans were making, twice as much as the 84% that didn't. Twice as much. Now, get this. We didn't talk about the 3% yet. However, the apparent kicker is that the 3% of the class that had both a written plan and a written goal, right? So they had the goal and the plan together. They were making 10 times as much as the rest of the class. So 97% of the class, they were out earning them by 10 times what they were making. Because not only did they write it down, right? They wrote the goal down, but then they also created a plan for the attainment of that goal. 10 times as much. Now, these were two studies, one done at Yale in 1957. Was it 1953? And then one done at Harvard, 1979. Two different studies, identical results. Now, you guys hear me all the time talking about goal setting. And you got to ask yourself, why am I always just talking and shouting? You got to be intentional. You have to be intentional. This is why. This is the case study. The case study clearly spells it out. That when people aren't intentional, they're not going to create at their maximum potential. Even when you practice just a percentage of intentionality, right? That smaller group that set the goal. If we go back, I believe it was the 13% that just wrote down the goal. They did twice what the unintentional could do. But then the person who set the goal and created a plan did 10 times that of what the unintentional could do. So this morning I got to ask you, are you going to begin to work and develop your life with a different level of intention? Does that make you a little more willing to do the work, to write your goal down? Just write the goal down. Does it make it more compelling to learn the science of creating a plan for that goal? That's the reason I developed Slay Your Goals. And I'm going to challenge you this morning. If you haven't, go to the website, download the book. If you have downloaded the book, but you haven't read it, I'm going to challenge you. This is your why right here. Are you ready to do twice as much as the average? The book is going to show you how to do that. Read it. That's your why. I just gave you a why for reading the book. Twice as much as the average person. And then if you want to join the membership and learn how to actually put the science, use the science of goal setting in your life, 10 times that of the unintentional person. Now, I want to share real quick my why and why I help people. Now, the first reason is my purpose is your success. What I mean by that, my purpose is to help myself and others live the best life possible. And the reason why I'm so into helping people and so into sharing for people is because the pursuit of learning more about how to help other people has not only helped me, but it brings about this phenomenal fulfillment. I mean, let me give you an example. At 23, I set the purpose to help myself and others live the best life possible. And when I set that purpose, I was broke. I was in debt. Nobody knew who I was. I had just recently been kicked out of college a couple of years before that. And I was really trying to piece my life back. I was really trying to piece my life together. And when I distinguished my purpose, I really didn't have another plan. Like nothing was going well for me. I was at rock bottom in my life. And so I decided that at the very least, if my mentor at the time was sure that following my purpose was going to help me in my life, I was willing to go all in. I was willing to throw all the chips in and say, all right, I'm going to make decisions from now on aligned with my purpose. And so I began to do that at 23 years old, 24 years old. Less than 2 years later, I found myself in a leadership role in corporate America. Less than 5 years later, I found myself in a global position, leading a global operations team and traveling the world and living in different countries and doing work. Less than 5 years after that, I found myself as the first African American of my company who was an executive and officer of that country, all without a bachelor's degree. Simply because I was willing to set goals, create a plan that was aligned with my purpose. Aligned with my purpose. And that's why I'm here today. That's why I'm sharing this today. Because I know that the more that I stay aligned with my purpose, the more successful I'll be. And my willingness to be of service has actually brought more success into my life. That's my why. That is genuinely my why. It's brought my family. It's opened me up. I mean, this is what introduced me to coaching. This is what gave me the capacity to actually be in a loving relationship. This is what's given me the capacity to be the father that I am today. That is different than the father that my father was to me. I mean, he didn't know what I knew. But because I poured myself into self-development and have been of service to other people, they've poured themselves into me. And it's made me a much, much better man. You know, I'll say I've been blessed beyond measure, man. I've been blessed. And part of the reason for that is because of one word. One word. And this correlates to this conversation about stress. One of the most important words to any human. And that word is attitude. Every day I get up, I just had a conversation with the spring coaching group about this. The wonderful individuals who are part of that group, 4 people. And I set an intention for the day. I choose my attitude. And I can't tell you the power in choosing your attitude. How you feel right now in this moment, like how you feel right now is based on your attitude. That attitude came from one or two places. One, an intention that you set when you woke up this morning. And you said, this is who I'm going to be. This is how I'm going to feel. This is how I'm going to show up. Or the default attitude based on whatever's in your space. Some people right now, they're tired. And you might have all types of reasons for why you're tired. But I want you to consider that the reason you're tired is because you have a tired attitude. You might say, nah, Linnell, you don't understand, man. I was out late last night. And man, I kicked it, or I was up late last night and I didn't want to be. I had to take care of a relative, or I had to come to someone's rescue. And that's why I'm tired. And what I'm going to tell you is this. That's the default setting. You can choose something different. How do I know? Because if you were away on vacation and you had kicked it all night, and you woke up to the sun shining off the water, and you see the birds flying over the ocean, it's likely with the same amount of sleep, you would breathe in that air and say, today's a wonderful day. Because you've allowed the setting of your external environment to set your attitude. So if your environment has the power to set your attitude, how much power do we have? to set our own attitude. The difference between the successful person and the unsuccessful person is nothing more than the ability to choose a winning attitude whenever they want to. That's it. That's the only difference. Now, before we went to break, I began talking about stress and how we traditionally think of stress as something bad. You know, when you talk about stress to anybody, if someone comes to you, they say, man, I'm stressed. Like how we typically think about this is, man, stress is something that I don't want in my life. I don't want stress in my life. And right now, if I said anybody want to welcome stress into their lives, they'd be like, no, sirree. No, I don't. But what makes stress bad? And think about it like this. Most of us right now, if I did a survey, I believe that most of us would believe that stress comes from an external event. So right now in this moment, nobody's bothering me. I'm fine. And then the phone rings and I get bad news. And that stress comes from something outside of me. But I want us to start thinking about stress a little different. Let me give you an example. We know that illness is caused by stress. I believe that we all can agree with that. And we're taught that if we avoid stress, then we can avoid illness. I mean, in many ways that, you know, that's one of the things that I believe most of us believe when it comes to dealing with stress. And believe it or not, science has now proven that stress is caused by the human response to external events. So it's not necessarily the external event itself, but it's the human response to that event that actually causes stress. So then we have to begin to ask ourselves, okay, so stress is not necessarily something that is external, like it comes from external factors. Stress is something that I produce based on my response to the external factor. So if that's the truth, that means that if I'm looking to avoid change, I'm looking to avoid challenge, that's not the remedy for stress. The remedy for stress has to be something else. Now, if you were listening to the first hour at the end, I actually gave the remedy. The one word that definitely has the most impact on any human being in life. The one word. But I want to really drive something home here. Stress is more about your response to an event than the event itself. Now, let's go back a little bit. At the bottom of the hour before, that one word I talked about was attitude. And believe it or not, the remedy to how you deal with stress is your attitude. Now, the other thing that causes stress is worry. And I want you to think about something here. Worry typically has something to do with attitude. Something else that causes stress, environment. My environment is not the way I want it to be. Again, it comes back to the attitude you choose. There's a story I hear. I heard this story often. You may have heard it before. But there's a story of, and it's actually published in a journal of Psychology Today or something like that. But it's a story of two men, and they both were raised by an alcoholic father. And these two men go through life, and they have very different outcomes. And so later they're interviewed, and one of the young men, he is incredibly successful. He's really delivering on his intentions for life and doing phenomenal things. And his brother is a hopeless alcoholic. And when they're interviewed, what happens is the interviewer asks, what impact did your father and his way of being, his alcoholism, have on your life. And the successful brother says, after having a father like that, you have no choice but to be successful. He was like, the one thing I knew is I did not want to go down that path. And so I chose to look at life through a lens of opportunity and always look at the blessings I had around me. One of the things I heard my father often do was complain, and he complained about this and he complained about that, and he would drink his complaints away. And our lives never got better when I was a child. And so I decided to choose a new attitude and to go in a different direction. This son, this brother was incredibly successful. When the journalist went to the other brother who was an alcoholic, he said, what impact did your father's life have on you? His alcoholism have on you? And he said, look at me. I'm an alcoholic too. All I saw was negativity. All I experienced in my environment was stress and woe. And what other choice did I have in life than to do the one thing that was exposed to me, and that's drink? Now, when you listen to those two brothers who experienced the same things, what that tells you is that it's not about what happens to you in life. It's about how you react to what happens to you in life that really makes all the difference. It also helps you see that perspective and attitude are the one thing that differentiate successful people from unsuccessful people, that differentiate people who can deal with stress versus those who cannot. Perspective and attitude. It's not what happens to us in life that makes the difference. What makes the difference is how we react to it. How we react to something makes all the difference in life. It makes all the difference in terms of who we become. It makes all the difference in how we can cope with stress. Different person, different reaction every time. You can put 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, 5 people in the same situation. Each person is going to have a different reaction. And the reaction that that person has is going to be based solely on 2 factors: their perspective and their attitude. So then the question becomes, what determines your reaction? Now, what has been said in most books I've read and most experts that I've had the opportunity to see is that reaction comes from perspective. And whatever perspective that you have is going to generate your reaction to whatever that thing is. Now, what do I mean by perspective, and what is perspective? Perspective is based on a lot of factors. It can be based on how you grew up. It can be based on your experiences. It can be based on where you've been. It can be based on the variety of life that you've seen or haven't seen, right? Perspective has lots of many different factors. This is why attitude is the main grain. Attitude is the main grain because regardless of your past experience, regardless of the life that you lived, you can always choose a different attitude. And that attitude will determine your reaction, and your reaction is what causes stress. Let me say that one more time. Your attitude will determine your reaction, and your reaction is what dictates whether or not you will experience stress. Now, let me put this a different way. Let me put this a different way. Because I know somebody right now, they're listening and they're like, man, this Pollyannish dude, here we go. always full of positivity, always talking about being positive, always talking about the reaction. You don't understand my life. Well, let's use science, right? Science is objective. I think we can agree that science is objective. So right now, all of us, we're being exposed to bacteria and viruses. They're all around us. Disease is all around you right now. Whether you like it or not, there's nothing you can do about it. You can go and spray some Clorox, put bleach all over the place if you want to. But just in a matter of time, that very spot that you called yourself completely cleaning and sterilizing will become full of viruses and bacteria once again. Because we live in an environment of virus and bacteria. So if we're constantly exposed to viruses and we're constantly exposed to bacteria, and the only time we get sick is when we combine those microbes with stress, then you have to ask yourself, why are we sick? Is it the virus or the stress? Is it the bacteria or the stress? And by the way, your reaction to the sickness has to do with your attitude, right? The likelihood of you healing faster has to do with your attitude. How do you react to the sickness? So why do we get sick? Then you have to assume that the reason we get sick is because it's not the bacteria is not the virus. It's the combination of your reactions and stress with your natural environment already. Perception has a lot to do with how we react. And reaction makes all the difference. Because if I'm surrounded by toxic people and toxic things, it's my reaction that makes all the difference. I'll tell you my reaction. My reaction is to get out of there, right? I'm going to get out. But how you deal with the stress is really an afterthought. What we need to think about is how are you reacting to your external circumstance, to your external situation. Now, let me come back to something real quick. I opened up the show with goal setting. This is why I did it. I know sometimes people are thinking like, man, he tricked me. I joined and he's not even talking about stress. He's talking about goals. See, when you have a goal and you're serious about your goals, what happens is that comes along with a commitment. And a commitment will change your perspective and it will change your attitude. Let me give you an example. Some time ago, I shared this with some of my clients. Some time ago, my wife and I, it was a Monday. I remember it well. Can't tell you what Monday it was. But my wife and I, we got into an argument on the phone. And, we're both entrepreneurs. She was at her office and I was at my office. And when we were on the phone, I had actually stepped out the house because I was looking to do something nice for her. I wanted to do something nice for my wife. So imagine this. I'm leaving the house to go do something nice for my wife, to go to the store and purchase something I knew she would like. And as I'm driving, we're talking and we get into an argument. External, but very clear, external, right? This is external to me. But I want to be clear. I have a relationship goal. And this relationship goal comes with the commitment that I have for who I intend to be for my wife, right? This commitment around what I'm looking to create in our marriage. So I'm driving to the store. We get into this argument. By the time I pull into the parking lot, we hang up. I'm fuming. I mean, I'm mad. I'm like, man. Now, if you're not married, you might not. Well, I guess some of us are in relationships. But if you're married, You know, like if you've ever been married, then you understand the normalcy of relationship requires some level of conflict. It just does. Okay. Somebody on Facebook like, y'all argue? Man, we married, bro. You were married. You understand. But you got to listen to what I'm saying here. Okay. This is why goals are so important. Intention and commitment is so important. So I pull into the parking lot. I park the car and I don't feel like going into the store anymore. Right. This is now I have to determine my reaction to the stress. Right. My reaction to my external environment. Am I going to allow this to become stress and actually begin to permeate my being? Because I have a decision to make. Or am I going to align with my commitment, my intention? Right. This is why goal setting is so powerful, folks. Right. So sitting in the parking lot, everything in me, I do not want to do anything for my wife in this moment. I promise you. I just want to drive back home. Right. In my mind, I'm like, man, she don't deserve nothing after the conversation we just had. She don't deserve nothing. Then I think about my goal. I repeat it in my mind, the commitment that I have for our relationship. And even though I didn't want to, I get out the car. I walk into the store. Now, here's the hilarious part. When I walk into the store, I look around for what I was looking for, and I can't find it. And so the first thing that comes to me is walk out the store. You tried, you failed. I'm like, no, that's not honoring the commitment, right? Because when you're committed to something, that means you have to go all the way. So I go to someone in the store and I tell them, hey, this is what I'm looking for. They go, oh, no, it's right there in aisle 8 or so, whatever. I go, I find it. I go to the cash register and I purchase what I was purchasing for my wife. And I put it in the bag. I get in the car and I drive home. And when I get home, I tell myself right now, this is me being petty. I'm being petty now. I tell myself I honored the commitment, but I ain't giving it to her tonight. She ain't going to get it today because, she wasn't being what I would call a good wife. My feelings about it. Okay. And here's something powerful about commitment. I walk into the house and I set the bag down on the kitchen table and I get a phone call and I forget that I have the bag on the kitchen table. I go down to my office in my home and I start working. I completely forget that the bag's on the table. Now, mind you, we had an unpleasant conversation. And so when my wife gets home, I hear her come into the house and I go, oh, okay, she's home. And I'm doing whatever I'm doing. I don't go up to meet her because, again, I'm being petty. And I just keep working. And before you know it, she comes down, arms open, jumps into the seat I'm sitting in, gives me a big kiss and a hug. It's like, oh, thank you so much. I saw what you bought me. Because I left the bag on the kitchen counter. Now, do you think I was still upset? Do you think I was still angry? Nah. Because I honored the commitment. And that commitment created a chain reaction in my marriage. Because now, as upset and petty as I wanted to be, any man knows it's hard to be petty when your wife plants a big wet one on your cheek and gives you a hug. All that came because I have a goal. I don't know how I would have went if I didn't have the goal. If I wasn't clear on the commitment I have for my relationship. Why did I share that? I shared that because when stress hits us, one of the reasons why or when external environments hit us, because remember, stress is the reaction. I apologize. So when external situation or circumstance hits us, our reaction is dictated by our commitments. What are you committed to? What are you committed to in your health? Because if I'm committed to making sure I get adequate rest, making sure I eat the right things, making sure that I'm healthy, then if I'm committed to those things, even when something from the external environment begins to press down, I'm going to make the decision to continue to forge forward. Same thing with revenue goals, work goals. When external environments begin to say, hey, it's not as easy to make a sale, I'm going to continue to press regardless of the external environment, going to continue to make phone calls regardless of the external environment, because my reaction is based on my commitment, not based on my default setting. If I go off my default setting, stress can show up. I can say to myself, in order for me to double my revenue, I need to make 10 sales phone calls a day. And so I begin down that path. And after 3 phone calls, 3 people have been unpleasant to me. And I can allow my reaction to the outside evidence, the reaction to the outside evidence to become stress and say, oh man, this job is so hard, man. Trying to drum up sales is so hard. And it creates stress. It brings stress into my life. And so the answer to how to cope with stress is to actually be committed to something bigger than you. See, because when you're committed to something bigger than you, when you're committed to goals and you're actually making decisions aligned with those goals, that becomes your reaction versus the default way of being. Now, you're human. Are you going to become disempowered? Absolutely. But if you're hanging on to your commitment, this gives you the opportunity to instead do something different, to show up differently. And this is the biggest difference between those who end up stressed out and ill and those who can persevere regardless of their external environments. The difference is the level of commitment. Now remember, commitment means you have to keep your word to yourself. And I believe that one of the reasons we're so stressed out is because we're not doing a good job of being honest with ourselves, with being 100% with ourselves. And see, here's what happens. When I have an intention, when I have a commitment, nobody has to know. My wife doesn't know. My friends don't know. But I do. I do. And if I begin operating outside of that commitment, I begin doing things outside of that commitment, it's going to create a tension. And many of us right now, we feel the pull. We feel the tension of being out of personal integrity. We're out of personal integrity because we're not honoring our word to ourselves. I'm not even talking about somebody else. Our word to ourselves. We're not taking action aligned with our intentions. If we're setting powerful intentions, when I opened up this morning, I shared many of us don't even have powerful intentions. Many of us are operating on autopilot. And if you're on autopilot, I know the reaction is stress. I know the reaction is going to be stress because you don't have anything to hang on to. You're just being blown with the wind. I'm serious. Like, if you're on autopilot, if you don't have hardcore goals in the 4 pillars of life, consider whatever pillar that you don't have a goal in, you are being blown with the wind. What do I mean being blown with the wind? I mean that if you have a work goal, but you don't have a well-being goal, it's more, your health is probably completely out of whack because there's nothing to hold on to. And so you're being blown with the wind. When you see a good a good burger commercial, you think, oh my goodness, I've got to have it. Blown with the wind. When you see a beer commercial and you're thirsty, you go, oh, that looks refreshing. I got to drink it. And you drink it. You're being blown with the wind. When you see a pizza commercial and the cheese is just stretching, you think, oh, we're going to have pizza tonight, because you're being blown with the wind. There's no hardcore goal or commitment. So that way, when external forces come and hit you, you don't have a proven way, a proven direction for how you're going to react. And so since you're being blown with the wind, it feels like you're not under stress. But then all of a sudden you realize, man, I'm weak in my body. And now that work goal you have is under attack. You can't keep the commitment because you're exhausted. You're fatigued, and you're exhausted and fatigued because one of the legs on your table is short. Your table's wobbly. Your health ain't right. That's why you're fatigued. That's why you're exhausted. So then you can't keep the commitment for work because you don't have any intention with your health. Or you can't keep the commitment for work because you don't have any intention in your marriage. This is why the summit is so powerful, because we talk about the 4 pillars of life. So this is why intention matters when it comes to being intentional, when it comes to coping with stress. This is why goals matter. See, because if you don't have a destination, you're going nowhere fast. And you're just like the average person. And the average person is stressed. The average person is stressed out. Right now, I challenge you. You can walk out of your house into the street. And if you get into an intimate conversation with a stranger, you say, how you feeling? And you get beneath the surface because everybody says, I'm good today. I'm okay. But if you get beneath the surface and you say, are you married? Like, yes, sir, I am married. How's your relationship? They'll go, it's all right. It's all right. Maybe 1 in 10 and say, I'm happily married. Thank you. I'm happy you asked. Marriage is the most wonderful thing that happened to me. 1 in 10, maybe 1 in 20. Because there's no intention. You can look at them and assess their health. You can look at them and say, they ain't healthy. They're not taking care of themselves. Right? The average person, if you ask them right now, what do you want to accomplish by the end of the year in your work? Like, what's the number one most important thing that you want to establish in your work? They would know. And likely it's because they're working for somebody else and they told them, this is what we're going to do. Most of us aren't creating life for ourselves because of what matters to us. That's why we're stressed out. There's tension everywhere. You're doing things you don't even want to do. Most of us, if we do go get that pizza, we eat the pizza, we enjoy it going down, having a beer, washing it down with beer. By the way, one of the most unhealthy things you can do is to eat pizza and drink down a cold beer, because it actually turns all the grease into sludge in your system. One of the most unhealthy things you can do. But that's what they sell us, right? That's what they sell us. That's how the winds blow in the United States. And so you eat the pizza and you drink down the beer. And then afterwards, you get heartburn. And you ask yourself, why'd I do that? Why'd I eat that? Why do I always do this to myself? You've created stress. You've actually created stress because you've obeyed the outside environments because you don't have a real commitment in your life. So this morning, then it makes me want to ask you, are you a reactor, an actor, or a reactor? Years ago, I talked about this. Are you an actor or a reactor? There was a boy who had a weak and sickly body, and his father consistently instructed him that despite his physical circumstance, the external environment, right? And by the way, this is his body. His father instructed him that despite his physical circumstance, if he strengthened his mind and took action, he could accomplish anything. And so the boy believed his father, and he accepted this advice. And later, he became the 26th president of the United States, President Theodore Roosevelt. Are you an actor or a reactor? You see, many of us are using our circumstance and our situations to dictate whether or not we're going to feel stressed. And this morning, what I'm telling you is you have to get intentional. You have to say who it is that you're going to be. You have to create what's next. This is, again, why I talk about goal setting so much. How often are you creating the life you want to live by acting in a way that will bring that life to you? Or are you only reacting? If you dream of a life you want to live, but you wait for this life to come and find you, you exist in a passive state of being. And to exist in a passive state of being in the United States of America means that you will be swallowed whole. The marketing is too good. The science behind the marketing is too good. You cannot live in this country. You cannot navigate the external environments. Even if you don't watch TV, there's going to be a billboard. And now the billboards, they can light up and change. I mean, they can show you 3 messages before you can even drive by. Don't get stopped by a light. If you're not intentional, if you're not acting with confidence, if you're not someone who is willing to take initiative, you're going to find yourself reacting and being blown with the wind. Instead of waiting on someone to smile, an actor will take the initiative and smile at others. Man, nowadays, people walk around looking mean. Man. And then when you nod your head at them, they're so shocked and surprised they don't know how to be. You smile and nod your head. They're like, oh, what am I supposed to do? Instead of greeting them, instead of waiting for someone to greet them, an actor would take the initiative and greet someone else. Are you creating the space around you? Are you? An actor is someone who is constantly looking for an opportunity to meet a new person and learn new things. An actor is always looking for opportunity, always looking to spread a positive word. An actor takes a proactive approach towards creating the world in which they want to live. That's an actor. That's someone who's operating with intention. A reactor is just living in the world that's created for them. Man, this morning, I had to choose. I come around the corner on Wells, and they're running a marathon. Look at the clock and say, wow, gave myself about 10 minutes to get to the studio. I'm right next to the studio. I asked the lady, can I drive through? She said, sir, you need to turn around. That's exactly what she said. I said, okay. Hey, now, right there in that moment, I could have reacted. You don't know me. I'm a radio host. I got to get up. Okay. So then I said, all right, Linnell, what are you going to create here? Looks like you can't drive to the studio this morning. I said, well, looks like I'm going to have to get out of my car and walk. Where's the nearest parking lot? I had to pay. Like normally when I come to the studio, I don't have to pay. I could park underneath. They give us a validated coupon. I get out for free. I had to pay. Then start walking over. As I'm walking over, I see a young man and he's talking to 3 or 4 cops. He's got blood on his shirt. I stop. Hey, what's going on here? They say, sir, you need to keep moving. I just asked the question, what's going on here? I asked the young man if he was okay. Would you like for me to stand by or would you like for me to roll? He says, you can go ahead. I'm fine. Okay. All I'm saying is every encounter, there's going to be so much going on around you. So much going on around you. All this before I even got into the studio this morning. If you're not willing to create what's next, if you're not operating with intention, your external environment will take you out. There's a quote by Václav Havel that describes the way of the actor vividly. And what he says is vision is not enough. It must be combined with venture. It is not enough to stare up the steps. We must step up the stairs if we're going to truly align with our visions. Actors step up the stairs. Actors are creating the stairs. So what defines a person as a reactor? I want to really dive into this, because if you're stressed out this morning, consider that you're a reactor. If you're listening to it and you were looking for the silver bullet for how to cope with your stress, and then you heard me say attitude, and then you got mad, consider that is your silver bullet. You just got to figure out how to load it. You got to figure out how to put that bullet into the chamber of your mind and actually be able to fire it off when you need to. But I can guarantee you some people turn off the radio mad when I said that the answer, the silver bullet to coping with stress is attitude, because they already have a poor attitude. Their poor attitude wouldn't even let them hear the rest of the show. What? Attitude? This is stupid. Click. That's why they're stressed. That's why they remain stressed. So what is a reactor? A reactor is a person who lacks confidence. A reactor tends to be a timid person that typically scouts continually for trouble. See, a reactor is always trying to stay safe. I'm sorry. Stay safe. And the funny thing is, a reactor is never safe, which is why they're always looking to stay safe. A reactor sees life through a deficient lens. Nothing ever goes right. Nothing ever is right. Reactors are usually concerned that someone is trying to take advantage of them. So as a result, reactors never ever come across opportunity, because there's no opportunity. Someone's always trying to take advantage of me. A reactor tends not to smile at a person unless that person smiles at them. A reactor tends not to greet a new person unless that new person takes the initiative to greet them. A reactor lives in a world that has limited possibility. A reactor tends to dwell in an unhappy state of being. Why? Because they're waiting for someone to make them happy. What the reactor doesn't realize is that in their world, their world simply reaps the negativity that they've manifested in their mind and in their space. Because after all, how could a reactor create anything positive in a world in which they only react? If a reactor wants happiness, their formula is to simply sit and complain until that happiness has arrived. If you're a reactor, has your happiness arrived yet? It's not going to. There's a Chinese proverb that says, the man who waits for a roast duck to fly into mouth must wait very, very long time. So my question to you this morning: when it comes to coping with stress, when it comes to how you deal with external factors, the external world, are you an actor or are you a reactor? And I want you to take an honest look, because, some of us, we might be 50-50. We might be an actor in certain places of our lives, and we might be reacting in other places. And so I want you to take an honest look at yourself this week and notice where you're reacting versus acting. Because remember that how you cope with stress comes down to the decision you make to your external environments, the external factors. And what will guarantee that you can react in a way that's not stressful is having a commitment that you can hang on to, that you grasp a hold of. And no matter how the wind blows, you hold on to that commitment. You take action as an actor aligned with that commitment. And that in itself is how you cope with stress. This is how you completely navigate life outside of stress. Now, here's the second practice. So the first one, take an honest look at yourself this week and notice where you're reacting versus acting. Because self-awareness, we talked about this ad nauseum over the last few weeks. Self-awareness is the first essential step towards progressive behavioral change in any human being. You have to be self-aware. So that's the first practice. Practice number 2. Think about the steps you need to take to orient yourself towards taking action. Like, how can I be a person that is taking action? And this morning in the first hour, I covered in detail why goal setting is one of the most phenomenal steps that you can take. Now, William Ernest Henley, he ends the poem Invictus with 2 powerful lines that brings this thought home. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. If you remember Nelson Mandela, man, I can remember being in South Africa and going to Robben Island and having the opportunity to step into Nelson Mandela's cell, which was, like the size of a closet. And I'm not talking about the size of most of our closets these days. Okay. I know some of us, we got these walk-in closets and we can walk down the line and look at the clothes we're going to wear and look at the shoes we're going to choose. I'm talking about the size of a small closet. So here this man is, and he's living, sleeping, using the bathroom in what is really a small closet cell. And every morning he gets up, he's taken out to a yard where he was given a sledgehammer and he's told to break up limestones. And at the end of the day, that limestone, they pick it up and they put it into barrels and they force them to go to the edge of the ocean and watch that limestone get dumped into the ocean with no purpose, no reason, only to humiliate and demoralize them. And then they have to go to sleep in that small cell, and they have to wake up the next day and do the same thing over and over again. And I believe that Nelson Mandela, the only reason he was able to survive in a place that many people died, many people gave up, and come out and become the leader that he was, a leader that many of us admire, is because somewhere well before he got into that cell, he made a decision that no matter the circumstance, no matter what came his way, he was going to choose his attitude. He decided somewhere along the way, before he fell into those unfortunate external issues, that he was going to be an actor, that he was going to always look for a way to act in a way that aligned with the attitude that he was going to choose, that he was going to perceive his world in a way
that he wanted to perceive it, and not the way that someone else wanted to perceive it. I imagine the guards, when they would dump the limestone into the ocean at the end of the day, that they had spent the entire day in the South African sun breaking, that they would laugh, that they would probably crack jokes and hurl insults. And in this external environment where many of us would give a human being the opportunity and the excuse to be stressed, to actually become negative, to actually feel hopeless, Nelson Mandela chose hope. And one of the reasons we correlate the poem by William Ernest Henley with Nelson Mandela is because he shared those words with us in a speech where he declared, "I am the master of my fate, and I am the captain of my soul." And this morning, I just want to ask you, are you the master? Are you the captain? You see, worry blinds us. And it blinds us to the opportunity that we have full control. Are you the captain? Are you the master? You may not be able to control what comes at you, but you can control how you perceive it. You can control your attitude. Are you the master? Are you the captain? This morning, if you joined because you were stressed out, consider this. You're the master. You're the captain. You get to choose. You get to say, if worry is the thing that's blinding you and stressing you out, 40% of the things that you worry about won't happen. 30% of the things that you're worried about already happened. 12% are just things you're worried about in terms of your bodily harm. And only 8% of what's clouding your mind and creating stress may or will ever happen to you. So again, I ask, are you the captain? Are you the master? Who will you be when the next serious external circumstance comes your way? Who will you be when the next serious situation approaches your doorstep? Will you be a reactor, or will you choose to act powerfully based on the goals that you have for your life, based on the commitment, the internal commitment that you've made to yourself about who you choose to be, how you want to show up? Because you know that you can live a life far greater than the life that you're living today. Because we all have a seed of greatness, and we all have phenomenal potential. The question is this morning, just will you choose a different perspective? Will you choose a new attitude that allows you to align with the goals and commitments that you've made in your life, so you can live a life with less stress? That's the secret. Attitude is the secret this morning.
Join Linnell Harris every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. here on WVON 1690 AM.